And I'm not going to be much longer with y'all. I understand we need to move beyond color. I'm not about that, but y'all raised it. If you started, I'll end it for you. Don't start nothing, it won't be nothing.
Welcome to Pegasus versus the World, where we take on challenges, comedy, trending topics, and some travel.
City boy! City boy!
All right, man, so this black pastor, his name is David James Manning, is going viral. I don't know when he did this, but it's going viral right now in the right-wing pundit space. And I'm just going to start this off. I'm going to say this shit is all cap, meaning it's a lie. Like, he's tripping. You know, when he said some of the things he said, it was so persuasive. I was like, damn, does he have a point? So I just started looking into it. And a lot of these points he was making is cap. But I want to find the part that's going viral specifically, where he's just saying that black people in Africa never made anything, right? He's just, you know, basically saying, like, black folks, you know, they don't have a mind and all these, you know, I mean, it's all just, honestly, it's kind of blasphemy. It's interesting coming from him as well. And I don't know his lineage, but I think just him having, you know, black skin and the stance he took. Now, I'm not saying you're supposed to, just because your skin color is a certain way, you're supposed to take a certain stance. But I would have thought that potentially he could have lineage from some of the places he's talking about, so he would have done some of the history. So let's get into it. Let me try to find the spot. We'll just play it.
The color blindness and always look at the man by the content of his character, never the color of his skin. I'm down for that. You get my vote. Yay and amen. I'm for that. But before we get there, we need to hear some truth. Black people and white folk. Black people got a problem. And it's a God problem. When black people see the world, I don't care. You can train them. You can train a black man to be a physician. You can train him to be an astrophysicist. You can train him to be a lawyer, but you can't train him to understand the world. He doesn't know. I'm telling you. There's not 2 cents worth of difference between a mass murderer. There's not 2 cents of difference between a petty thief that's locked away in prison than a black doctor when it comes to understanding the world. Listen, you listen to me.
This is where he starts talking about understanding the world, and he starts making this correlation to, you know, being from Africa and that we didn't create anything in Africa. You'll see what I'm saying. It's just kind of boggles my mind, if we're being honest.
We got to deal with this. And we need to begin to acknowledge it, talk about it, ask God to help us, because only God can help black people where they are. Black people had Africa, that big old continent over there. They never built one boat that was seaworthy, not one.
That's all cap. We'll talk about that. That's a lie. Saying Africans didn't build boats is incredibly misleading. It's a lie. And a lot of times it's because the type of boats, I think they were called a dhow, and they were for trade. You know, and a lot of times they try to compare the boats to Europeans because Europeans were making war vessels, but Africans were making trade vessels from different materials that were localized, right? Like wooden material and stuff like that. But anyways, we'll continue.
God to help us, because only God can help black people where they are. Black people had Africa, that big old continent over there. They never built one boat that was seaworthy, not one.
That's a lie.
There's not one monument in Africa, in all of Africa. I know you're talking about Egypt. Egypt is not Africa. There are no great cities that were built. Even before.
People would push back on that Egypt bar too. I know right now we'll just say sub-Saharan, that's how you say it, Africa, since that's the point he wants to make. But there's a lot of different reasons to argue for Egypt that should be in this conversation. But, you know, some people just like, oh, only Arabic people are in Egypt. But anyways, I'm not no damn super historian or geologist or anything like that, but there's definitely two arguments there.
In Africa, in all of Africa. I know you're talking about Egypt. Egypt is not Africa. There are no great cities that were built. Even before the first colonization of white people coming to the shores of Africa or the slave ships, black men built nothing.
That's a lie. Nigeria had stones like the built. He's capping, y'all. This is just weird. And then this type of shit goes viral. And people will live and die off of the words of something like this. And y'all can check me in the comments. I'm not here. Y'all know I'm not on this whole, I only say woke is because that's the terminology people understand today. But I'm not with the woke brigade. I'm not, driven by all these factors from the left, but I'm also not driven by all these factors from the right. This is a lie. Nigeria had a civilization before colonization. They had stone buildings. They were iron welders or whatever, bronze. Like, actually, there are certain, I don't know if it was the Portuguese or people would go to Africa and be like, damn. Like, they would be in awe at some of the sculptures and stuff that were created by these African civilizations. And there were stone roads, stone buildings. So, like, for him to say this is just mad disingenuous. It's like, how are you going to just count out Nigeria? And then Massa Musa, one of the richest men in history. Bro, okay, let's just keep going. Let's listen a little bit.
Cities that were built even before the first colonization of white people coming to the shores of Africa or the slave ships, black men built nothing.
That's a lie. That's super disingenuous.
No sewer system, no houses above one level, and none of them made out of stone. All of them made out of grass and wood. Black men.
Now, he's not capping with the sewer systems and, people, effing up their water sources by, different things happening, whether people are using the bathroom in it, However, like, there's just so much different stuff. And I honestly don't know. I don't know specifically, this, he's saying 2-story houses and things like that. But it also takes, okay, civilizations are going to build things based off the environment. Okay. When you're in Europe, there's certain factors that you have to overcome, problem solve, right? I don't know if there were more populations there, but I just know in Africa, there's also tribes still, things are more spread out. So when you're building buildings, right, like, 2-story, 3-story buildings, it's what? To house more people, to be more efficient in these ways. But if they weren't living like that in Africa, and then again, I don't know. I know there were stone civilizations for sure in Africa before, the Europeans popped up like that. I just think a lot of this stuff is disingenuous. Also, because of some of the travel, right? The traveling that was happening, a lot of these places that traveled more got access to different technologies and started figuring out technologies from different areas. We see the same thing happening today. So I also think that's disingenuous, because if the African people were isolated and only focused on trade, then yeah, they're going to miss out on a lot of the technologies. And to say they're incapable of building things when they've already survived, they've made tools, they've made weapons, they've built cities, they've built trade vessels. That's just disingenuous, because if they built that, that means just in time, you start to elevate, you start to evolve, you start to learn things. And essentially, what I feel like gave people who traveled, not just European, but people who actually traveled, they would learn things from other cultures, pick it up from medicine to different techniques, all this stuff. And that's what advanced them further. And if they weren't traveling, I think that could be a hindrance. But I don't know. This take just seems massively wild and disingenuous. Let's listen, though. Let's listen with an open ears and open mind.
Before the white man ever got to Africa, the worst thing that could ever happen to South Africa was when they gave it to Nelson Mandela and black folk. That was a great nation. Now, notwithstanding apartheid was wrong, we all know it's wrong. I'm against it. There should have been some other resolution, though, than turning it over to Nelson Mandela. Disease, AIDS, and crime is running wild in Johannesburg. They're killing one another over there. They're dying of sickness. The government is mismanaged. The people who ran the nation are now leaving the nation because black folk don't know how to run no nation.
So so there are some things, I don't know Africa's politics like that. I'm sure with what he just said, there's some definite truths, because I've been seeing some shocking things online about, what's going on in Africa, but I've also seen the perverse. But, to say that this is because black people can't build anything is super disingenuous. And you got to also remember, like, I know I'm not saying this is right, but the way people are treated, a lot of times there's a knee-jerk reaction immediately. It doesn't mean that you're going to be sensible, calm, patient, and deal with certain things. And I don't understand why people are so disingenuous to think that, let's talk about America. Like after slavery, black folks were treated horrendously. And to think that a portion of that population wouldn't have a knee-jerk reaction to that and that ripples to today is kind of wild, you know? And I think as I look into a lot of this stuff, I just, you know, we're in a very unique space. I did the conversation. We talked about the Shiloh Hendricks and then the Carmelo Anthony and Metcalf stories. And this is a sign of the times. And I just believe that people are better than that, right? You know, again, with the Shiloh Hendricks thing, I was like, just take race out of it. Take all of that out of it. It's just about an unhinged person saying something to a child, in my opinion, right? But everyone who always gets on my channel and says they don't see color or take race out of it, they only want to use race as the talking point because she said the N-word and she has the right to say it. And this kid was stealing from her and all these different things. And I just think we're in this total paradigm of like, what do they call it? The simulation, where I'm just like, dude, what simulation am I in right now? I'm very concerned, and it's quirky because she says, you know, rappers say the N-word to make $1 million. Now she's saying the N-word to make $1 million, and this is just the world I live in today. But essentially what I was trying to address in that video was not that she said the N-word. I don't care. That doesn't affect me because I don't allow words to, you know, have that emotional trigger for me. It's just, you know, you don't call kids names, you know, you don't call children out of their name. It's just, you know, and for people to stick up for it because of the race thing, because, oh, we're sick of this, no more white guilt and all this stuff. I'm just like, I understand why people are like, yo, we're sick of certain things, right? The concept of white guilt. But I also don't understand how you could utilize those premises to stand on, you know, people, you know, saying obscenities to children. But that's where we're at, where both sides are blinded. See, this is an attack on just white folks and black folks. I do believe a lot of what we see from black folks is a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction from things that have happened in the past. There's also a spectrum of things that people won't agree with me with because they're so tied up in their ideology from the right or the left, but there's definitely a bunch of things that happened, and then now we're at right now, and there's things happening that I don't agree with. Like, you know, it's interesting. I don't know how deep I should get into this because I could just kind of go off. Like there's one conversation that I saw Charlie Kirk having, and I would have pushed back because I believe it was COINTELPRO where the, you know, basically these agencies like the FBI and CIA, the FBI murdered all of the, like the majority of the black leaders, you know, the Black Panthers and stuff like that. And people would be like, oh, they were communists, they were this, that, and the other. But until, you know, present day, that really hasn't happened on the other side of the fence, right? Like I believe January 6th has similarities to that, you know, in the sense of how the government came in and was like, okay, we're going to, you know, co-opt this and intervene. I think there's something to look at there. But there's these moments of time where there was crack and guns put into the urban environment, the ghettos. And this influenced a lot of things to happen. Now, someone like Charlie Kirk would argue, hey, you're an individual. You don't have to pick up that gun. You don't have to pick up that drug. But then I would also argue on the right side of things, the conservative right doesn't want LGBT books in school systems because what does it do? It influences things, or that's what they would say it would do. And I agree. I think schools should only be about reading, writing, arithmetic, history, you know what I'm saying, science, the foundation. We don't need all this extracurricular nonsense. However, why would they say they don't want these type of books? Well, they're this, or they're that. But the concept is it's because they can influence children because they're malleable, right? And, you know, that type of thing is the same thing. When you put all these things in an environment, a percentage of people are going to be influenced by that, right? And so I think people miss certain things. And I just think we're at a point, a pivotal point in America where we can do better and see these things because we have access to the information and actually come up with answers and try to work through it. But going on a tirade and saying black people can't build anything is crazy to me. It's crazy, especially, you know, he's implying that we have no self-worth or, you know, brain to come up with things on our own. He's saying we can be trained, but we can't do things on our own. I would just push back and argue that, you know, a bunch of those different things. You guys, if you want to hit me in the comments, if you have some better research, hold on, let me pull this up because there was a couple things. I mean, I pretty much said, the idea that black Africans didn't invent or use ships before colonization is false. It likely comes from Eurocentric history that overlooks or downplays African maritime history. Here's some nuance. African maritime history, pre-colonial. D. Howes, I don't know if that's how you say it, as discussed, used on East African coast, built by Swahili people, could travel across the Indian Ocean to Arabia, India, and beyond. Built with local materials and adapted over generations. West African river and coastal navigation. West African civilizations like Mali, Songhai, and the Kingdom of Benin mastered riverine trade using large dugout canoes that could carry 60 to 80 people. The Niger River was a major trade artery, much like the Mississippi in North America. Shipbuilding skills, iron and bronze tools were used to build boats, carve planks, and forge ship components. African shipbuilders used local woods and resin-based waterproofing methods. You know, we could get into this. I'm sure I could start asking it questions about the buildings and why. You know, this is mad disingenuous. I felt like there's a better way to make points because I think the point trying to be made is simple. Hey, the black culture, and I'm speaking from being a black man, the black culture is in a dangerous place right now because the way we react, the way, you know, the culture we embrace within, you know, let's say rap music and try to live these things out. There's a bunch of different things. All he's saying is black culture needs to take a moment to look in the mirror, address faults we may have, and just try to be better. That's what he's trying to say, but instead he's trying to tear it down from the roots, like the root cause is because we don't have a mind to build. And even people like the brothers from the Nation of Islam would absolutely go ham on this dude for saying so. This is just, I mean, it's crazy. And we're only halfway. I didn't even get to watch the full video. I bet some people watch the full video. But the reason I stopped here is because the clip that I just showed you is what's going viral. This is what all the right-wing pundits are posting. And the people I seen them post are like black right-wing pundits, you know? So I don't know if they were pushing back or not. Like I saw some of the Hodge twins and that's where they're kind of laughing and you kind of, you know, agreeing with like, oh yeah, Egypt is Arabic people. And I was just like, hey man, I would push back on some of this. And it's so interesting that you have something as powerful as ChatGPT or Gronk, depending on which way you steer AI, where you could ask it questions and it give you literally could have the answer for a lot of the stuff that we just debunked him saying. And anyways, y'all let me know. Let me know if I am totally off base and totally wrong here. I'd love to see it and look some things up. But I mean, the history of Africa is rich, and it's a country very rich in resources. And have they, you know, maybe lost their way in certain aspects? Possibly. You know, I was always shown like Nelson Mandela good, Obama good. And as I start doing research, I'm like, oh, there's some interesting things there. But then again, you know, placing this whole dramatic, oh, they're the blah, 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 and then letting the people like George Bush get a pass is crazy to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just insane to me because I grew up in the Bush era and saw, you know, weapons of mass destruction and all this crazy stuff. So to like just try to, there's these narratives being pushed and I'm like, yo, we got to kind of equalize and see things for the truth and try to be better in general. Anyways, you know, C-level student just thinking out loud. That's all this was. You guys let me know.
City boy, city boy.